yourself to World with Tactics podcast, and today we are watching another video. It's going to be about ketamine. It's going to be about taking ketamine. I would say, and I am actually looking forward to figuring out, orally, not intramuscular, I think. I've had a little bit of a preview to this episode that I'm going to show you in right a second, but I don't really know. But anyway, it is interesting because ketamine apparently has some good use for psychotherapy. So ketamine-supported psychotherapy, I think it is called. May be the case, may not be the case. But I believe that it really indeed can be quite useful, as data shows. And, there's more and more people talking about it, and more people, don't want to say suggesting it, but maybe using it and more studies on it. Something I think that should be pointed out is that probably before using ketamine, one should definitely look into regular psychotherapy, and probably even different forms of psychotherapy, since there are different forms of psychotherapy, and meditation and all the other practices one can use to improve one's mental state, and not being not directly being like, well, let's just, hit some fucking ketamine and then everything is going to be okay. No, probably not really. It's, I think, making things easier and maybe also seeing things easier. This is something to underline when one has the ability to do so, since I don't think that there are many doctors nor psychotherapists that are doing this at this point. But probably as data emerges and more studies are being done, I think this landscape might change as well. Sorry, by the way, for being a bit out of breath. I was just working out before and I thought, well, let's... I was actually watching this video on my own and I thought, well, I could actually kind of react to it. I still don't like reacting to things. But anyway, let's have a look. By the way, it is by Timothy, aka Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss, Ketamine Experience, Dr. John Crystal, The Tim Ferriss Show, the original video. So this is just a clip. The full video, the full episode by The Tim Ferriss Show, or from The Tim Ferriss Show, is actually quite long. I think it is 4 hours, quite 4 hours, and probably pretty comprehensive when it comes to ketamine and the use of ketamine for different things. I would at least hope that it is very... first of all, very good and also comprehensive, but I think it is also titled this way. But yeah, let's have a look.
Let me share a few things from my experience, which I am sure, just to be clear, format-wise diverged quite a bit from what you were describing in terms of best practices, duration of IV, etc. And I chose a clinical setting for a number of reasons, and I think we'll come back to a few of them. One was I wanted to make it as inconvenient as possible for me to use ketamine. So we'll come back to that. The second was I really wanted to standardize the experience and have the versatility that IV provides, which is not the case with hitting the golf ball with intramuscular injections. So I wanted to be able to, which I did ultimately, have the ability to dial up the rate of administration in the middle of, say, a therapy conversation with a therapist. And then at one point, I remember very, very clearly, dialed up the rate by about 25%, and suddenly things got very strange, and there seemed to be a distinct lag between my thought, my mouth moving, and me hearing any sound, which makes it very hard to talk. It's kind of like...
And I don't know, but I think at this point, it may not be that useful for talking psychotherapy, I mean, there are several different versions and kinds of psychotherapy. The one that you're talking might not be that nice when you're not quite able to talk. So I think since it is such a field that is not as researched yet, or not as maybe let's call it normal for the sake of making things easier, not as normal yet. There might be certain difficulties, especially I would believe that, people are reacting differently to ketamine and, different doses of ketamine. So, some people might have this dose and, have a really pleasant time talking to the therapist. and some other people maybe need a bit less of ketamine or even a bit more to get the same effect, or just get this. I actually don't know what it does, but just the effect. So might kind of actually be the case with all the drugs that one might be using for therapeutic reasons,
like having delayed reverb on a microphone or a set of speakers when you're trying to talk. It's extremely challenging. And I remember saying, John, that was the name of the technician or medic, a former medic who was administering the ketamine. I said, John, things are getting a little bendy. Could you please dial back? And he was able to dial back, and then I could resume the session. And I wanted that type of ability to experiment. The session itself, and this is where I'd love to hear a bit about the setting. The session itself, there was an intake process, and I was in a room sitting in a comfortable chair, recliner effectively, big screen TV, and you got to choose your effectively, let's call it a nature video with scenes of nature with music overlaid. And I standardized on one Redwood video. and I should say that was the first time I had ever watched a video in any type of clinical or serious setting with drug administration. So I found that in and of itself quite novel. We can come back to the pros and cons of that at some point. And my experience post-session was, and we were gradually escalating dose. I mean, starting well below, let's just call it the minimum effective dose that you're outlining, and then probably exceeding it by quite a bit by the end. And my experience after the session became a running joke with my girlfriend, because I would always forget something at the clinic. I would leave my wallet, I would forget my phone, I would forget my backpack, I would come home, I'd put something somewhere, forget where it was, and it seemed like my short-term memory was just gone for a period of time. And that leads me to two questions. So number one, how common is that one experience some cognitive deficit or short-term memory impairment for a period of time? And what does the actual setting look like in the clinical setups that you've supervised or observed? Is it in a blank room? Are they staring at the ceiling? Do they have eye shades on? Are they listening to music?
And I think it might also, definitely be something to consider, that there might be some drawbacks, as there probably are always drawbacks, whatever compound we are talking about. So it might actually also not be usable for some people in certain conditions or having certain conditions. I might believe that there was something about the heart and ketamine, that there are, when you're having high blood pressure, some shit that you can't take it, and so on and so forth. But I still think, and I really appreciate the fact that people are studying it and people are trying to, basically get things further and, do the research, and people are working on psychotherapy and making psychotherapy maybe more efficient, maybe more effective, which is amazing. I'd say just, doing whatever we can do to make people feel good about themselves, about their life, about whatever the fuck, they need help with. So that's, definitely great to see. And also, as far as I know, Tim Ferriss is supporting, it might be a clinic, I've forgotten, might have actually also been a lab or a study around psychotherapy or psilocybin, I think. And that's amazing. And I think it was actually quite huge of a contribution in like millions of dollars. But yeah.
Etc.
I've seen all of the above in terms of settings. And we've always used blank rooms, partly because what we're trying to do is to make ketamine available to as many people as possible and have the most efficient settings. So in our clinic, which is co-led by Dr. Robert Ostroff and Gerard Sanacora, both experts in this work, it would look like a surgical recovery room with a number of bays, and everybody has their own space. They're shielded from seeing other people by curtains and things like that. So they do have some privacy, but the doctors are moving and the nursing staff are moving from patient to patient to patient in the session. So it's more of a strange, in some way, almost a communal experience. Not that people are wanting the communal experience per se, but it is a very efficient way to deliver the treatment. One of the things about ketamine is that it distorts perception in exactly the way that you described. So some groups try to keep the level of stimulation limited because the more intense the sensory input on ketamine, the more you get distortions of the experience. And it is said by mentors of mine who worked the emergency rooms when you would get PCP and LSD, intoxicated people come to the emergency room, that the management strategy was the opposite of those two medications, because PCP, like ketamine, causes distortions of the input. So the more input that you get, the more distorted things become. With LSD, there's almost like a battle for control of your perceptual world. So when you put the blinders on and produce sensory deprivation, you tend to augment the intensity of LSD. You're withdrawing the organizing effects of the sensory world. And so you tend to have a little bit more stimulation in the emergency room setting with the psychedelics than you do with PCP.
Is there, let's see here. Well, actually, I think you answered the question. I was going to ask you if cost and scale were no consideration. I suppose I didn't frame it this way. For the purposes of scaling, it makes perfect sense that you would want the least cost, the least, on some level, least space required, least.
I find that incredibly interesting. There is a fly. Please go away. Thank you. I think it is quite interesting and really honest of Dr. John Crystal to point out, well, you're having your privacy, yes, but there are also other people in the room, so it's just some what do you call them? I don't remember what it's called, but you have your privacy, but there are other people in the room, and it is just very effective, giving the treatment to as many people as possible, which apparently is the thing they want to do, which is really great, which is really good. But I also thought, that is strange. Quantity over quality, does it matter even? Is having some in some sort of a state or some sort of a scenario better than kind of the quote unquote best scenario when you're on your own? I don't know, in like just your own room and whatever, and there's no people, maybe just your therapist and whatnot. Is it actually kind of possible with? I'm just imagining it in the way of, okay, I'm having one therapist and many clients or patients, and this therapist is walking around talking to everyone. I don't think that this is the case, but I imagine it in this way. Still, let's see what Tim is saying, because I also thought, that is kind of strange.
Training, right? You don't want it to require a 4-string quartet or something. But if cost and scale were no consideration, do you have any thoughts on how you might design the setting? Would it be any different? I understand the point that you made, which I think probably applies whether cost is a constraint or not, about minimizing inputs. But do you have any other thoughts on what that might look like?
It's an interesting question. My general feeling about ketamine, most clinical experiences, is that when the patient is comfortable and feels well cared for and supported, that outcomes tend to be better. So the whole setting that you described, a really comfy chair, a really relaxing video that's not too stimulating, privacy and quiet, is pretty close to an optimized setting. And the video, mainly because not much happens, describing a treatment where not much is happening during the infusion. If you're going to reactivate trauma memories, or if you're going to reactivate alcohol memories, that itself is going to be a pretty engrossing intervention and probably will occupy a lot of the kind of sensory space of the infusion. It sounds like you had some version of that.
Yeah, well, the problem with video, one of the many potential complications with video is that not all content may provoke the warm and cozy feeling that you may be seeking. So I remember watching for the first time this video, and it's like beautiful redwoods and rivers, kind of creepy, not creepy, but like minor tone melancholic music, which I didn't love. I didn't expect that or see that coming, but I was already kind of strapped to the seat and on the ride. So I couldn't get off in the middle of Pirates of the Caribbean Disney World ride, so I was in it. But I remember at one point on a higher dose, there's this one scene that popped up out of nowhere, and it was just this. It was this fox, this little fox. It looked like maybe it was Patagonia or something like that. It was just sitting on this freezing cold beach. It was sitting on this sand, and it just looked miserable. It wasn't doing anything. I was like, why is this fox here? It looked really unhappy. That was not conducive to an optimal clinical experience.
And I do wonder, and I at the point of not overstimulating the patient and not having too much input, because I mean, every input is a chance of, basically subjectively saying, okay, I don't like it. This fox, some people might think, well, okay, it's a cute fox. Maybe some people like to see it miserable. I don't fucking know. But Tim definitely did not. So I find it interesting, and then probably also important to notice that it's very subjective, of course, and no stimulus and the least amount of stimulus as possible might kind of actually be the way to go. But I don't know. What I wonder as well is it's not talking therapy apparently, as far as I have understood, though, or at least understood, which is interesting. So there might be somebody around here seeing this video, seeing this podcast, maybe writing down in the comments what this is entirely about, if it is just one sorting out things themselves, which would be interesting and actually kind of cool to see, because this would actually make it really efficient. I mean, having hundreds of patients in one room with, of course, some privacy. Maybe seeing somebody freaking out might not be the best thing, I would imagine. But yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna end the episode here. I hope that I've been able to shine some spotlights on certain ideas today for you, and I'm hopefully gonna see you the next time. So bye-bye. And now I gotta wait a bit to make sure that the outro is also in the video, because when I'm pressing the end stream button, sometimes it just goes away. But